Oh, okay. All right. And share. Oh, can
Mm-hmm.
can you guys see the title and
Yep.
everything?
Yep.
And
Yep.
the cursor.
Yeah.
Okay, probably better than I can. All right, I'm gonna hit the start from the beginning button. Start from the beginning button. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, I think you guys can see it better than I can. There's a
Yes.
you guys are in the way here, and I can't move anything. But I kind of know what the program is about. So, all right, what we're going to talk about tonight is a certain type of nautiloid. There's like a minimum of 9 orders of nautiloids in the Ordovician, which was without any, there's no question, the epitome, the acme of nautiloid, um, both diversity and abundance. Okay, let's start out with the title, with the image I have here. Notice that the Bloidosteros here has the aperture up, whereas the Cerdorhizoceros has the aperture down. Now, I occasionally get the question is, which way is the way to photograph them? Okay, that's a question I get, not always, but as Data said, but often. Now,
I was going to ask that exact question.
yes, and it bugs the crap out of people because the Bloidoceros is the preferred way. You look at the treatise and the apertures are up. Well, that might be, but in reality, the, the apertures were down. And we'll talk about that later on. Now, here's an interesting story. James Hall, everybody knows James Hall. He photographed nautiloids both with the aperture up and the aperture down. Same author. Now, I'm told, I haven't seen this, but in a paper or a book, he photographed nautiloids in both ways in the same article, aperture up, aperture down. So at that point in time, someone could have chosen, I imagine somebody did, which way to do it. Now, to be honest, aperture up makes a fossil look better, in my opinion. So, aperture up for now. And we're going to be talking about, of course, the Ordovician. I think everybody here knows about the Ordovician. If you don't, you probably haven't heard me talk ever because that's all I talk about is the Ordovician. And here is the rock units that I'm dealing with is the Platteville Formation. This is Dennis Collada's, and you can see it down here. This is his revision of the names and their ranks to get us in line with Missouri. Missouri. Well, Missouri has Ordovician too. Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Although these names here are still occasionally different, but it's doable. So Platteville Formation, we're going to deal with the Mifflin and the Grand Tour members, and in the Grand Tour, which I can't see, but let's see if I can get rid. No, I can't get rid of it. Oh, wait a minute. No, that didn't work. Oh, that didn't work either. There we go. There is in addition the Cowan and Forston members. Okay, I want to see if I can get this a little bit smaller. I'm still having trouble. Nope, not working. Anyway, can you still see it now? Hello?
We're
Yeah,
at the
we can
Platteville
see it.
Formation fauna.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, the Platteville Formation and fauna, real quickly, because I've gone through most of this previously. Platteville rocks are mostly dolostone in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, which is good, and I'll explain why later. It contains a diverse and abundant fauna. Nautiloids of the published taxa, 28 genera and 50 species. Now remember, the Platteville was a relatively short deposition period. Bob Sloan thinks it was no more than 1 or 2 million years. That's not a lot. Snails, 28 genera, or 20, yeah, 20 genera, 34 species. Clams, 14 and 20 plus. Bracts, trilobites, some good trilobites, bryozoans, corals, and echinoderms. The fauna is concentrated, as I showed on that diagram, in 3 rock units. The Mifflin member had 4 facies, dolostone, which is the most friendly to mollusk fossils, limestone, the residuum from Dixon, and Fenimore up, well, near Fenimore, Wisconsin. The Grand Detour member has 2 beds, Cowan, this fossil, and Forston, which is, as you'll see, unbelievably fossiliferous. Here is a more detailed section of the Platteville. And you can see the Mifflin and Grand Detour with the Cowan and Forston. You guys can see the arrow, right? When I'm playing with it, I'm hoping. There is a bentonite, not always, but often on top of the Mifflin. Let's take a look at it. Here's a Platteville section in a quarry near Ogle. The Pecatonic and Mifflin, and you can see this. This is termed a grassy layer. Yes, I know these are bushes, but that's the term. It's an unnamed K bentonite that's on top of the Mifflin. That is a volcanic ash bed that hit the water and deposited on top of the last Mifflin rock between the Mifflin and the Grand Detour. And you can see Grand Detour is a lot different in lithology than the Pecatonica and the Mifflin.
So I come home from a hard day slinging lattes today out in Beaverton.
I'm sorry? I didn't hear that.
Don't worry about it. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Platteville depositional environment. Shallow, warm water, open marine carbonate platform. I mean, it's just ideal for substrate critters. Well oxygenated waters with normal salinity, in situ shell accumulations, and that's why there's so many of them. Located in the southeast trade global wind belt. Remember, and I'll show you a map in just a second. Most of Laurentia was south of the equator. Occasional influx of volcanic ash formed the bentonite beds, and the program I gave at Expo was about the dike. The dike and the Millbrook are the 2 most written about bentonite beds in the Ordovician by far. The open marine carbonate platform is known as the Mohawkian Sea, which is home of the Goniaceros fauna. These are names, the Mohawkian Sea, because one of the stage name in the North America is Mohawkian from New York, and the Goniaceros fauna because that is a unique nautiloid just to the Platteville. Here is Laurentia, south of the equator. Here is the trade wind belts. This is the orogenic belt that blew up the volcanoes that produce the ash, and the trade winds blew it right into our area. More than 60 bentonite beds are in the Ordovician. That's a lot. And I always put in the hurricane tracks down because they move the opposite way that they do in the northern hemisphere. They move this way. Okay, hurricane tracks. And here is a cross section that shows how the ash beds were deposited. Here is the subduction zone in the Iapetus Ocean, southeast to northwest, and the winds blew. Here's the trade winds. They blew the ash into our area that became eventually bentonite beds. And here is Goniaceris, the namesake of the fauna. And as I tell everybody, no, this is not a crushed fossil. This is the way it was. It was a flat fossil. Bob likes to call it a flounder. The apical and the back end, this end right here, this is the bottom. This is the venter, the belly of the beast, and it would be on the ocean floor, and it would back into the substrate. So this part here was in the mud. This part was open, and it was an ambush predator. The tentacles would come out and grab whatever came by. Another nautiloid, a gastropod, whatever. Now, the oncocerids. The assumption, and it's a fairly common assumption, is that most Ordovician nautiloids were straight-shelled, what we call orthocones. Well, this is true for several Ordovician nautiloid faunas, but not all. Now, if you go over to Cincinnati, yes, you're going to find straight-shelled, large endosauroids, siphungals of endosauroids, Triptoceras duceri, which is a common nautiloid. In fact, there's a layer of the shale in there called the Triptoceras duceri shale that Bob Fry wrote his doctoral thesis on. And yes, but not entirely all, most are. But this is after the Platteville. This is younger than the Platteville. Things, that the extinction that I explained in the at Expo. Well, that changed everything a bit. Small certicones, brevicones are often most common. For example, the Ozarkian faunas, and the Platteville fauna. As they were as or more abundant, believe it or not, than snails on the ocean floor. The sheer diversity of Ordovician nautiloids, and I'm going to show you that, is remarkable. We need to change our evaluation of buoyancy and lifestyles. Because of Nautilus, the big thing about nautiloids is that they have a hard shell, but because of removing fluid from the chambers and replacing it with low pressure gas, they're neutrally buoyant. Well, yeah, and so are the straight ones, Actinoceros, Proteoceros in the Ordovician, but the oncocerids, not as much. Now, here is a list of the first 8 orders of the nautiloids, and if you make a quick of the species, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 48%. What's the other 52? Well, you know what that is. It's the oncocerids. 52% of the species are of the one order. Another way of looking at it, here's the chart. Now, this is a preliminary chart that I made for the paper that Bob and I are writing, but it doesn't have the new taxa in it. So here's the 8 orders of nautiloids and their diversity, their location in the beds. And here are the oncocerids. Large order. Look at the number of Bloidosauruses. We're going to add a couple more, I guess. Yay. The morphology. Extremely diverse order in both conch form and taxa. The conch forms. Mostly exogastric certicones, and I'll show you that, and brevicones. Occasionally endogastric, which is more primitive. The Elsmerocerids were almost all endogastric, the first order. But there's orthocones, torticones, they look like snails, gyrocones, not quite coiled, and nautilocones. And believe it or not, the oncocerids were the ancestor to the Nautilida, which produced Nautilus and Alonautilus. So these guys right here are the ancestors, pretty much direct, of Nautilus and Alonautilus. That's kind of cool. Now, here is Russo Flowers' nautiloid shell shapes. What's the most common for the oncocerids? Right here. Exogastric certicones. Exogastric because the siphuncle is on the outer part of the shell, and this defines the venter, the belly. The other one is the endogastric. Notice the siphuncle is on the inside of the curve. That's still the venter, the belly, but it's kind of an awkward shell when you look at it. This is much more advanced and streamlined, as we'll see. Now, here's a plate that I picked up in the Forreston of the Beloit West Quarry. Check this out. Every nautiloid you see is an oncocerid. From Beloitosauruses, Zitalosaurus, Alumetosaurus, 12 nautiloids, 13 snails, and 3 clams in this one plate. And you can see the size of the plate. That was kind of cool to find. The sutures are mostly transverse, often with ventral saddles. I'll show you that in a minute also. Body chambers, they are often contract, sometimes constricts near the aperture, and occasionally flares. I'll show you all that in just a second. The siphuncle is relatively small with segments, which are the actual, are the rings, that are inflated, often termed beaded, nucleoidal, or ellipsoidal. Now, here's 3 Beloitosauruses to show you the morphology. You can see the siphuncle in this one right here. The phragma cone is the part with the chambers. The body chamber is the part where the animal lived. There's connection between the animal and the rest of the shell by the siphuncle. The siphuncle removes the fluid and replaces it with low pressure gas. And yes, in real life, these would be upside down. Okay. Here's this is a contracted aperture. Here, flared aperture. You can see that real nicely there. These are called the lateral sides. The dorsum is the side away from the siphuncle. And Beloitosaurus laicum has a very constricted body chamber, very distinctive. You see that, you know what you got. So these are our Beloitosaurus oncocerids that show you the different parts. And here's Richardsonostris beloitense. I got this in at the Avon Quarry in Wisconsin about 35 years ago, and it shows the siphuncle on here. Very nice siphuncle. Part 2, paleobiology. Now, if you notice the septa on the, I should have showed you that on the 3 fossils. The septa, the chamber partitions are close together, and that means there's small chamber volume. That's going to produce a negative buoyancy. These animals almost certainly lived on the substrate, the ocean floor, and they did not swim like the straight-shelled that have deposits that counterbalance the buoyancy effect of the gas. Most would have been confined at or near the substrate. Now, this is interesting. Not in Ordovician, we don't have any in the Ordovician that I know of. Color patterns surround the conch surface. Counter shading not needed if you're not in the water column. Verticalish orientation of conch most likely. Movement, crawling, saltation. They would use their siphon and jump up. Or they might have done a little hovering. I mean, they might have been close to neutrally buoyant, and their siphon would produce enough energy to keep them maybe hovering over a bit until they saw something they wanted to eat. Planktonic floaters also are possible. Food sources: grazing on algae encrusted rocks, scavenging, mud processing, filter feeding. Now here's that Silurian oncocerid, Pentarameratus murum. Notice that here's the dorsum, the back, here's the venter, the belly, and it has these ornamentation on both sides, all around. Now, here's a fossil I found at Dixon. This is what straight-shelled Proteoceras had. It had marks on it. These are just simple lines that would break up the profile. But look, they disappear here. They disappear here. This is only on the dorsum. The animal was horizontal, so it needed something to break up its profile when viewed from the top. And down here, there's nothing, so it blended with the surface waters when seen from below. If Nautilus, you've seen Nautilus shells before. The red-brown markings on the top are like these. The white part of the dorsum and the living chamber is like down here. Perfect camouflage. Okay, now let's talk about some of the actual animals and get some pictures of fossils, which we all like. Oncocerus was named by Hall. Here's Oncocerus collinsi. I found this at the Rochelle Quarry in the Cowan. I saw one rock that had this oval in it, and this was sticking out. So I cracked it, got this out, looked for the other side, and found it. Unfortunately, that was lost. But I cracked it out and got this out. It doesn't fit perfectly because it had been broken in when it was shot. But look at the detail. These are growth lines, and what they do is they dip down, and this is what is called the location of the hypognomic sinus. What's the hypognomic sinus? It's if you had the aperture, there would be a little bit of a dip, and that's where the siphon came out, and it could obviously point forward, or it could go in the hypognomic sinus depression and point backward and move the other way. This shows it, and this is kind of cool, these growth lines. Conch is inflated, venter is generally curved, dorsum is nearly straight. This is the venter, obviously. Notice also that not all of them are going to show a siphuncle. This one does not. It is a true mud-filled tube that gives you information, but no siphuncle in this one. Growth lines outline deep hypognomic sinus. Sutures are mostly transverse. Body chamber, as you can see, tapers. Here's the only other one I'm going to use for Oncocerus, tetravalence. Conch is inflated, compressed. That means that its ventral dorsal length is greater than its lateral length. Venter is mildly curved. You can see that here. Venter and dorsum are both convex. They curve outward. Sutures are mostly transverse, and the body chamber tapers very slightly. Now, Beloidoceras. Beloidoceras was erected by Augie Firstday in 1924. Here are his photographs of three species: Pandion, Plebeium, and my favorite, Carveri. And here are the 9 presently published species of Beloidoceras. I'm going to go through 5 of them. These guys right here, nope. And I'm not even sure these guys could be considered actual Beloidocerases, but I don't, it is what it is. Now, to give you an idea of how common these are, this is a flat. This is a large flat. I got this from Dennis Collada. This is one of the large flats, and it has in all the species of Beloidoceras. Now, you might say, that's a lot of specimens. This is 10% of the Oncocerus specimens I've got. Downstairs, I've got flat after flat without boxes of just of Beloidocerases filling the flat. They were unbelievably common. Now, the genotype of Beloidoceras is Beloidoceras pandion. That was the one that First Aid used as his example. This is what Beloidoceras looks like. You can see this is the one I had before. You can see this siphuncle there. That one shows it. This guy is getting mature. How can you tell? You see the distance in the septa here, wide. Now it's getting smaller, and it'll get this next one will be even smaller. That's what happens when the nautiloid becomes mature, and then it lives for who knows how many years. Nautilus has been estimated between 30 and 35 years that it lives. This guy, the conch, is really inflated. It's kind of a little fat little guy. Venter strongly convex. You can see that there. Dorsal profile only slightly concave, slight constriction near the aperture, sutures widely spaced at the venter, which is obvious because it curves like that. Yeah. Here's plebeium. Probably the most common of the Boledoceras that you would find in all of the units. Conch is slender, very compressed. You can't see, but you can see how wide it is here, and it's not anywhere near that wide for the lateral. Gradual expansion, body chamber is straight. You can see that, especially here. Slight constriction near the aperture. Here's licum, as I showed you before. The strong constriction near the aperture it defines this guy. Look at how even the chambers are in that. It's kind of cool. It's a small one, slender, slightly curved, body chamber inflated a bit. You can see that here. Strongly considered, and sutures are transverse. They don't really do much. And here's carveri. I like carveri. It's a robust conch, very compressed, flared aperture. You can see that on this one and a little bit here. Venter is strongly curved. Dorsum in most of them is a little bit, but it is nearly straight in some. Sutures much more widely spaced at the venter. You can see that. And it produces, if you look at these, they don't go straight across. They they bend up here. That's where the saddle is. This would be the saddle. Sutures that bend toward the aperture. All right, that's a cool one. And here's the newest one, Boledoceras James Valense. First, they erected this in I think the 1930s, quite a ways away from the others. More compressed than be Pandion. It looks kind of like Pandion, but it's more curved, more compressed, constant curvature, slight constriction at the aperture, very slight. And then there's Richardsonoceras, first in 1932. These are probably the largest of the common oncocerids. Simplex and Bloedense are the only two. Now, I photographed these more or less in life position. Simplex, conch is slender, very compressed, strongly curved, gently expanding. See, it doesn't expand much at all. Body chamber slightly constricted. It's hard to see in this one. At aperture, sutures with ventral saddles. You can see those right there. Now, here's an interesting thing. There's only two species of Richardsonoceras. Could these be sexual dimorphs? This would be the female because it's the narrow one. In Nautilus, the aperture, you have to look closely at it, of those animals that are equal in age. The male chamber is a little bit wider because there's a sexual organ in the male called the spadex that takes up a lot of room, and so its opening, its aperture in its living chamber is a little bit wider. Well, so is our Arboloidense. Could that be the male? Could these be sexual dimorphs? Yeah, I can't prove it. Nobody can prove it, but it's an interesting speculation. More robust, moderately compressed, moderately curved, gently expanding. Body chamber slightly constricted at the aperture. Sutures with slight ventral saddles. You can see them there. Now, I said I have these in life position. Here's just a portion of Dennis Collada's immense Ordovician seascape from the Platteville. It's in his book. If you have it, or if you could, want to get it to the Illinois Survey. And this is how he pictures Richardsonioceras. Notice that the aperture is directly out. The animal's shell curves up like this. It has tentacles like Nautilus because it's in the Nautilus side of the nautiloids. There's another side, the ammonoid coleoid side, which had arms, not tentacles. That's Dennis's, and they're beautiful. He had me send him one of these Bloidoceruses in a position like that, and then he did wonders with the computer and came out with this. This is really, really gorgeous. There's the operculum, the eyeballs, the tentacles, and there is Tetranota. I can't think of the species, but that's a snail. There's a snail head. The Zitaloceras, one of the most unusual nautiloids. Zitaloceras. This is from Dixon. This is from Lee Center. The crenulations are so strong, the ornamentation is so strong that you can see it here on the Steinkern. There's a siphuncle. Now, why the difference? I waited till now to talk about it. The dolostone, the shells of the mollusks have been dissolved away. So between the critter and the matrix, there's an airspace. Not big, but there's an airspace. So when you crack the rock, this thing falls out. You don't have the shell, the outer shell, to merge with the matrix, which would make it really hard or impossible to get this out. So I prefer dolostone Steinkerns. Most people prefer this. This is the way the animal actually looked in life. This is from the Dixon residuum. Notice they're dipping down the hypognomic sinus. Yep, that's it. Same thing here. Really kind of cool. But there's no siphuncle. And you can't slice these. These are usually calcite spar, and they would disintegrate if you section them with a saw. This, no problem. Slender con, depressed, moderately curved, not really, it's not curved much at all. Surface with wavy crenulated transverse frills, frills moderately spaced in this species. Dip and frills outline the hypognomic sinus. Here's Clarkanium, quite a bit different. Larger than Bloidense, moderately curved, very closely spaced non-frilled annulations. You can just see them in here. Real fine lines on it. High, widely spaced, wavy transverse frills. That's these guys right here. And here's a new one. This is from the Fenimore. And notice the pattern in this. Totally different than the others. I think I've only got two examples of this. High frill, low frill, high frill, low frill, high frill, low frill, ad infinitum. I don't know what we're going to do with this. If we're going to make a new species out of it, we got to talk about it. And that's the pattern. But it's a Zitaloceras. The crenulations are a giveaway. Oh, by the way, can I do this? The Fenimore facies of the Mifflin is really bizarre. You get Steinkerns, but you also get these guys with the outer shell on. It's kind of a combination. The matrix is really soft, so it dissolves away nicely. I just picked this up at one of the small quarries. It was as is. You didn't do anything to clean it. So weird, very weird facies. Dennis and I have talked about that a long time. Additional Platteville Oncocerids. Now, here's Certorhizoceras. This is the one that was on the beginning. And this would be kind of the living, the orientation in the living animal. But I looked at these when I first, these two specimens, same day, same quarry, gorgeous. I looked at these and I said, you know, the way the living chamber goes, these look like septate monoplacophorans, which is a different mollusk. So, could they live this way? Or could they live this way, like a mono probably did? I don't know. By the way, that's my number on it. It tells me that I got these at the um, State Line Quarry in west of South Beloit, Illinois. Uh, the state line is the road leading to the quarry. Believe it or not, one side is Wisconsin, and the other side is Illinois. Yes, we got weird states. Here's Loganoceros. Here's Manitulinoceros nilium, kind of related to Zitaloceros. If you notice, some of the sutures are crenulated. Cool. Got this guy, Kathy and I got this guy at the Tressbridge Road Quarry, west of Rockford. That was a good quarry. Alumatoceros planodorsatum and Triptoceros planoconvexum. Very unusual to have the chambers because you normally get just a living chamber. Notice the constriction here also. That's the venter. Siphuncle is really tiny and it's located right there. This is the dorsum, which you can see a little bit of a mark there. Concluding remarks. The Mohawkian Sea dominated the upper Ordovician central Laurentia. Mollusks dominated the Mohawkian Sea. Nautiloids were a major component of Ordovician faunas. Nautiloids were extremely diverse in form and function. The order Oncocerida dominated by far the Platteville nautiloid diversity. Most oncocerids would have been confined at or near the seafloor. The paleoecology would be they were able to crawl, jump, and maybe hover a bit. It would be. Can you imagine going back there to see all that? Look at Dennis's seascape, you get an idea. Food gathering, algal grazing, mud processing, scavenging, and filter feeding. There's a couple of resources. First aid colada, Wilman and colada, and me. Okay, now.
Before you stop sharing, John, can
Just a
you go
second.
to the,
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Whoa, wait a minute.
Can you go to the screenshot that had showed the body chamber, then the fillet. I don't remember how to say that. Um, it was down a little further
Okay, let me
in
see
your
if I can get it. Let me see if I can get it back. Nope. As you may know, I'm not good with nope. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Found it. Now, I think maybe you're talking what that had the three nautiloids together.
yeah.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Yeah, that was how did and maybe this is a dumb question, but how did they grow? Because you see these
Oh.
small, did they how did they grow? What did they start off with? Just maybe, and because I'm wondering if the lines,
Yeah. They
the,
it's now we don't have any eggs or anything from we do have some from the Cretaceous, and it shows that the way the Cretaceous nautiloids worked were virtually identical to Nautilus. So we assume, because these are nautiloids, that these guys grew the same way. Now, what you're looking at here with this and this was a little bit more, but you're looking at only about 40% of the conch. The rest of it would be down here with a point, not a pointed end, a blunt end that was where the egg was. And The egg would hatch, just like in Nautilus, with several of these chambers already in place. And it was doing the same thing that an adult would. It would remove the fluid, become neutrally buoyant if it was uh, an actinoceros or a proteoceros, or it would just start making chambers, just like Nautilus, remove the fluid, replace it with low pressure gas. But see, these aren't very wide. They don't have a lot of room inside. So there wouldn't be enough gas to overcome the weight of the shell. Remember these sutures represent the chamber partitions, solid calcite or aragonite. So there's a lot of weight here, relatively speaking, for the gas to overcome. So these would produce. They would grow, they would move out, they would secrete a septa like this, and then the siphuncle right here would start removing the fluid. Once the fluid was removed and the gas was replaced, the animal would then grow and do it again, just like Nautilus. So it made these partitions, and it was thin at the time, but they were filled with fluid, so that buoyed them up. And then they would grow thicker. They would remove the fluid, then go on to the next chamber. Now, at a certain point, all nautiloids, unlike most invertebrates, stop growing. And this is it right here. This is it right here. This guy is gonna maybe do one or two more chambers, and then he's done. He's gonna live out the rest of his life exactly the same size. And this is when we think they became sexually mature, and nautiloids, unlike ammonoids or coleoids, could reproduce many years. Not a lot of eggs, but they could reproduce 5, 10, 20 years. Not sure exactly how much. Nautilus can probably reproduce for at least 10. But they
How
grew.
long did they live, John?
See, that's a key. We don't know. A lot of people have tried to say, and there's a story about this too. Yes, it's one of my stories. A couple of researchers came up with the idea that nautiloids secreted septa in a lunar cycle. Well, that didn't go over big, and it went the way of the apatosaurus, extinct. We don't know how often in Nautilus, there's no set number. Uh, when Nautilus eats a lot, it grows more, so it'll produce another chamber. If it doesn't, it'll slow down its growth and produce a chamber in a larger amount of time. So we only know about Nautilus because we actually had them and tagged some and then had some in captivity so we can measure how long they lived. But these guys, who knows? It would have to be, I would assume that we're talking at least 5, maybe 10 years. Again, remember, you're seeing only a small part. The apical end of the conch often does not preserve, very rarely in steinkerns. You can see where the hole is, but the shell's not there. So again, we have to do what we can use. But I would say, I would say 5, maybe 10 years, but that's about it. Nautilus lives longer, but then it's more evolved. It's a nice coiled, involutely coiled shell, the most efficient for being neutrally buoyant. And it lives in deep water. It goes up the reef and then back down. It's a very, very efficient animal.
So
Other
is there
questions?
any evidence that the partitions are related to environment as far as if they were able to be, I mean, because they all seem pretty uniform
Yeah.
within the species. So it doesn't seem it's like a tree growth where, a poor year and it's a
Yeah.
very thin.
Catherine, I got to believe that these guys actually fed better than Nautilus. Nautilus is true is more of a predator. Yeah, it'll take a lobster shell and crunch it up, and it'll use that to chemically help it make more shell and the partitions. But I think these guys filter fed, processed mud. I think these guys fed very well, so their chambers would be more or less fairly uniform. You can see this in lichen here. The chambers are there's a little smaller here, getting a little bit larger, but not much, and they're pretty uniform. So I gotta think that these guys, remember how small they are compared to Nautilus. Um, there's a dime. So I gotta believe these guys fed better, and so they could make their make their chambers a little bit easier, a little bit more uniform. Um, it's just again, anything this far back is just speculation on them, but we do know. They have a siphuncle, they have chambers, they had a definite growth size. So we know compared to Nautilus, these worked very, very similarly to Nautilus. It did much of the same stuff morphologically. Yeah, going to be a little bit different, different shape, different size. So,
Are
John,
there any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marv.
well, I was just going to ask off of Catherine's earlier question, John.
yeah,
When trilobites grow, they molt and stuff.
yes.
But in these animals, the body chamber, I mean, was it made out of some semi-rigid? I mean, had to be somewhat rigid in order for it to even fossilize in the shape that we have. But it must
Um,
have been flexible enough to expand as it
yeah,
grew.
yeah. The living chamber would grow also, but it would grow slower than the fragma cone. So this became, I made this thing smaller so I could see you guys. Can you still see the diagram?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So right here, this is the interface of the last septa and the living chamber. The living chamber would grow here, not here. It would grow here, but not as much as it would pull out and make a new septa and chamber. But yes, the living chamber, the animal is getting bigger. Now, of course, with these guys, not a lot bigger, not like Nautilus, but the living chamber, let me get some drink.
But it had to be flexible enough to expand like a balloon being blown up.
No, it won't do that. What it'll do is it'll grow in 3 dimensions, but it'll grow, like I said, the living chamber grows a lot slower. So yes, down here the living chamber was only this wide. Now it's getting, but it's again, it's growing along here. Um, and so this part will stay as is. This part gets a little bit bigger, but now, see, once they're near maturity, the living chamber isn't going to get much bigger at all. It's going to stay the same. The animal is going to, no, literally, the animal stops growing. It is, and you're right, Marv, trilobites, they pretty much grow continuously in their life. Bigger the trilobite, older the trilobite. Other animals too, other invertebrates grow continuously. Clams grow continuously, at least they did in the Ordovician. But nautiloids, cephalopods are totally different. They're the single most unusual invertebrate in the world, in the history of the world. Yeah, I know. Tully monster is a weird animal. Uh, but in my opinion, and I'm in the minority, it was a mollusk, a shellless mollusk. We have shellless mollusks today. Okay, but anything
So,
that has a shell, and that's Nautilus. It's the last one that has a shell. Well, snails and clams have shells too, but you can't complain. You can't. I'm sorry, those of you who like clams or snails can't compare them to a cephalopod.
So, so
This is just extremely the morphology, the paleobiology, and the biology of Nautilus is so complicated. It's so
So
I have
speaking of
a question. Oh,
shells, John,
yeah.
um, do they ever get preserved? Do we ever know what the shell look like and not just the
Oh yeah.
internal Steinberg?
Oh yeah. Dixon showed us that. Where is it? Yeah, that's the actual
I got you now. I
shell.
remember you
Yeah,
saying that now. Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Got it.
And
well,
I make this. Where do I did this in one of my papers that I'm doing. Why don't we use the shells more? Well, because I've got shells of Beloidoceras, and no offense to Beloidoceras, but the shells are boring. They're smooth. They do have growth lines on them. You could pick out the hyponomic sinus, but they don't show us much of anything. We know they had growth lines. We know, these have character. Xytaloceras,
what purpose did the frills serve?
well, they think, they're not sure, but they think that the frills, when the animals on the ocean floor, there's a current, and they think that these crenulations broke up the laminar flow of the water so that it wouldn't affect the animal as much. That's an opinion. Nobody knows. Did they strengthen the shell? Possibly. Did they prevent predators? Quite possibly. Um, believe me, when I first I found these two together, first time at Dixon, I was in hog heaven. And believe me, I worked on a farm. I know what hog heaven is. Okay.
Hey, so John, can you go up to
I
the
I one
top?
second, Catherine, one
Oh,
second. I picked it up, this one right, the bottom one, and cut myself. That's how sharp they are, or can be.
wow.
Yes. So this could be a predator avoidance system. They have, obviously there's only several things it could be: strengthening shell, predator avoidance, or laminar flow thing. But for whatever reason, Zitaloceras was the single most ornate nautiloid in the Platteville. Period. Nothing else comes close. Go ahead, Catherine. You had another
All
question.
right, can you go up 2 slides to the top slide that I see right there? Yeah. Are there any has anybody found the full fossil that is the body, the head covering and the tentacles or arms or
A couple, I'm not aware of any, I'm trying to think, I'm not aware of any in the Ordovician, but some have found um there was a Silurian one that made a big splash in the journals that had a triparate operculum. That's been found. These will never be found. The body will
the
never be found. It's going to dissolve away. It's going to, in fact, other animals are going to eat it. Remember, I don't know if you guys ever remember that one Endoceras that I found with the big monoplacophorus jammed in the living chamber. Well, that guy went in there to feed, and then got jammed in there and couldn't get out, and so he died. So they're being preyed upon. Now,
I
that
was just
said,
wondering if it'd be something like the Burgess shell where they actually you can see some of the soft material fossilized.
that was before nautiloids involved.
I know, but I was just
Something like it. Yeah,
wondering.
I know what you mean. No, none that I'm aware of. Huntsbrook Shale, no. Any of them, no. The only one of that shows cephalopod appendages that I'm aware of. Now, I'm talking about
What about Mazan?
before
Or
the
is that
Cretaceous. There's the ones out over in Europe and Asia. They
but
have
there's a Mazan Creek one, right?
exactly. That's what I was getting at.
Oh,
Your
sorry.
Mazon, your Mazon Creek has the only one or the earliest one that I know of that has the appendages. Genelskaya douglasi has 10 appendages. I use that picture all the time in my programs. And I say, look, this side had tentacles like Nautilus. Okay, done. The other side of the chart had arms. And I maintain for most of the Paleozoic, if not all, those guys had 10 undifferentiated arms. They were fleshing arms. That means Gonioceros, Proteoceros had these arms, not tentacles, arms. And now,
How do you know they were arms, not tentacles? Just
pardon me,
curious. How would you know determine if they were arms or tentacles?
tentacles are usually thinner. They won't have suckers on the regular. They'll have a club that has suckers on. And I was just getting to that. A lot of illustrators now for their papers of ammonites, Jurassic and Cretaceous, are showing the animal, are restoring them with 8 regular arms and 2 tentacles, just like squids, cuttlefish today. They're showing them that way. Uh, and not just one. Many authors are doing that. So they're looking at it and saying, you know, 10 appendages is the magic number. Now, how magic is it? Every cephalopod, including Nautilus, starts out with 5 pairs of arm buds. Every one. Nautilus ignores that and goes to tentacles. The second pair is reabsorbed and becomes 8 tentacles on, or 8 arms on octopods. And the fourth pair became tentacles on squid and cuttlefish. We know this. The genetics, the DNA, we know this. This is nothing, but in the Paleozoic, I'm thinking that all of the nautiloids that had arms had 10. Jedliskaya is a perfect example, a beautiful fossil. As I said before, anybody that finds one and wants to donate it to a cephalopod person, I'll pay you $1,000 if all 10 arms are shown. Something to think about. Yes, I know they're rare. Anyway, so that's the skinny on these guys right here. Mary Wade, the late Mary Wade, had a phylogeny of the cephalopods that showed the 2 sides. 2 of her orders were in the wrong spot, but not her fault. This is because after she died, well after she died, we found new evidence. In fact, some of my fossils are part of the evidence that moved one order over to the other side. Uh, I've always, I told this many times, I've always wanted to meet her. Russo, obviously knew her. She came in, and I never got to meet her, but she was brilliant. She knew nautiloids like only one other person knew them more, and that was Russo. She was I always, but it is what it is. But her papers,
I
yeah.
had a question here. Is the earlier you had talked about the egg would be in its own little section. How did that work? How was
Well, the nautiloids, Nautilus as the example, and the Cretaceous ones, they had a different way of reproduction. They would reproduce face on face as you'd expect. The shell kind of hampers anything else. And then the female would go to the substrate, not way down, maybe 100 meters, maybe 200 meters. We're not sure. Less for these guys than for Nautilus. And deposit eggs. How many? 5, 6, maybe 10. That would be a lot. And then take off. Now, different than coleoids that produce larvae that go up into the plankton and feed, and that's why they died out. The Nautilus eggs would sit down there on the ocean floor, growing, ticking, purring, getting itself ready to hatch, with chambers already formed, with a siphuncle already formed. Nautilus has 6 to 7 chambers formed. The Cretaceous nautiloids, 5 to 6. We're not sure about these, obviously, but that's what happened. It's a big egg. In fact, as you'd expect, being different, Nautilus has the largest egg of the invertebrate world, 25 millimeters. I mean, that sucker is that big. Come on. That's nothing comes close to that. But that's what got them through the Cretaceous. Their eggs were down there. Gestation. Nautilus, 10 to 12 months. So the eggs that are down there, I mean, what's happening on the surface? They don't care. Yeah, they don't care. By the time
And the
they hatch,
female,
it's done. The nitric acid has been neutralized. The plankton has reestablished. Here come the hatching nautiloids. Oh, look, we have a free world. Yay!
and
So,
the female, would they deposit? Where does the shell come from? Is it with the egg?
Oh
That's
yeah, no, they would just like birds.
okay.
They would just like, and they would
Okay.
lay the
Okay.
egg, and it would take them a bit of time to do that. So they're down on the ocean floor for quite a long period of time depositing the eggs. And then when they're done, they just go and do what nautiluses do. And the next year, they do the same thing again. Next year, they do the same thing again. Whereas most coleoids reproduce once and then they die out. Not all, but
Hello,
many.
John.
I'm sorry.
I said hello, John. Joe Sullivan here.
Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Pretty good. I got you.
Missed you at
Talk.
Expo. Missed you at Expo.
I know. I know.
Yeah,
Question for you.
sure.
I noticed that every one of these fossils doesn't have epifauna on them. Is that
Right.
because it is a Steinkern that they dissolved and, like, say, like a holdfast and everything was there at one time when after they died?
No, it's because I didn't show any.
Oh, okay. All right.
I do have some, not many, Joe, not many, but I do have some. I've got one, not a nautiloid, but I've got one gorgeous Galena Fusispira gastropod that has a monoplacophorus attached to it, and it is a Steinkern. So the two were linked, and they probably got in the mud. Both shells were dissolved, but they both fossilized. It is the weirdest thing. Well, one of the weirdest things I've got, and it's a Galena. I got that at the Rockford um, Sandy Hollow Quarry.
Wow.
I
Wow.
can't remember. I can't remember people's names, but I remember where I found each frickin' fossil. I don't know. There's something wrong with me. Anyway,
That's
so
okay.
I do have some. I do have some with possible limpets on them. Um, I've got a flat of some of them, mostly straight shelled. In fact, Marv is Jim. I don't know if Jim's still here, but we found some of your Devonian ones. There's Jim. I can't see because of this arrow. We found some of the Devonian ones that had epibionts on, right, Jim?
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool.
So we do have some. I just didn't. There's not a lot on oncocerids. They're mainly Endocerids, Proteocerids, and others like that. Some on I do, yeah, some on Oncocerus. I do have that, but very, very, very few. Didn't really want to, you know, start talking about that because they're not sure exactly what the critters are. They think they're limpets, but they're not sure. Anyway, yes, we do have but very, very, very few on nautiloids, epibionts. I could probably put all of them in one flat that I've
Yeah.
got. Yeah.
And that in itself says something.
Yes, exactly.
Thank
so
you.
I
Yes.
have a couple questions on this image that's on the screen right now. It doesn't appear from what I'm seeing visually, that you can see a body chamber. So
You're right.
was
You're
the
absolutely
body
right.
chamber visible from the outside, do you think?
No, because the outer shell covered it.
Okay.
So the fragma cone would be like that, and the living chamber would be right there. Remember, these guys have small body. The living chamber is not that big, really. So I would guess that about this much is living chamber. But the whole animal is covered by its outer shell. And you're right, Catherine, I'm sorry. You can't see it. You can't see it. That's why I like Steinkern so much. You can see everything in it. Everything. Siphuncle often, everything.
So if they closed off as they grew, they closed off each partition. Could the reason, I mean, are they similar to, and I'm just going to throw this out because I know it's not even close to the same exact thing, but if they were attacked by somebody, could they break off the tail end and continue on? Like since it's not,
Catherine, that is an excellent question because, in my opinion, I think many of these animals broke off their apical end, which would be this part right. See how blunt, this is the blunt end. This is where the egg was right here. That's where it hatched right there. But I think a lot of these animals broke off intentionally or otherwise the apical end, cutting down a lot of the weight. And so you would see it as a flat surface right here. I really think that, and of course, there's a group, an order that did that intentionally and then had a bizarre adult form, like an egg or, looked almost like an egg. But yes, I do believe that that happened. Now, the other thing, Catherine, is that if an animal bit through here, there's no animal there. There's just these chambers with gas in them. What are they going to get? They're going to get nothing. Now, it would affect this animal's ability to move and stuff, but the animal would survive because the animal's right here. The rest of this is just empty. Now, there's a siphuncle, but it had a small siphuncle like Nautilus. If you ever seen Nautilus siphuncle, my God, they're a little bit bigger than a pencil lead, but not much. They're really, really small, and they're fibrous. They're very delicate. So I got to believe that if this animal got chomped on by another nautiloid, it would lose that shell and then actually probably just use its siphon and leave Dodge.
okay.
So
Because that would explain why you don't see that part of them in the fossils very often.
I think Catherine often it does. Yeah, I do. I really do. I've always thought that these animals, and there was somebody else that had the same idea. I can't remember who it was. That there was either a natural truncation or like one of the big straight shelled ones. If they're moving backward for the most part. Their normal mobility is backward. Well, what if there's a rock there or something crack? And they just jam into it and they break their outer shell. It's not going to kill them. They have to do some adjustment, and they can do that with their, when they make the next chamber, they would survive.
And have you found any fossils where they show gastropod predation on them?
You know, I think I did. I'm not sure if it was at Dixon or what. I'm not sure what day. It wasn't not a lot, very few. There was a little drill hole, I think, in one or two of them, and honestly, I don't know what I did with the fossils. They're now. I see you judging me.
Oh,
I still have. There's somewhere. I never. I never lose an important nautiloid. There's somewhere I've still got them, but they're just minor drill holes, and I'm not sure about that. But yeah, there's a chance that gastropods could do that, but for the most part, a gastropod tries to get on a nautiloid, you know, and the nautiloid is just gonna say, "Hey, well, I won't. I wasn't gonna, okay, it'll just move out of the way. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
another question here. In the literature, you'll come across references to finding trilobites in cephalopods in northeast Iowa. Have you come across those very often?
I don't have it here, but in the Trask Bridge Road quarry, again, I don't know what's wrong with this brain, but in the Trask Bridge Road quarry, I was there on one of the burpee trips. Um, and I'm not going to comment on that, but I didn't stay very long. I was supposed to help identify things, but I went to this section that had the cowan in it. I knew where it was over there, and I had it was a high wall kinda. I had my hard hat on, and this tells you something. Somebody stopped me and says, "Where are you? Where are you?" I said, "I'm going over there by the wall." Is that a hard hat on you? Yeah, go away. And I went over there, and it was a coiled nautiloid, Plectoceris occidentale, the big one. And in the living chamber was a trilobite. Isotelus, I think. I'm not sure. Trilobites all look alike to me. Oh, I thought I was gonna get a rise out of Marv.
They don't
No,
all
they
look like John.
no, they don't. But it was actually in the living chamber. I used to have it here. I'm looking for. I must have put it with the rest of the coil guys. But yeah, I've got several of different that have trilobites in living chambers. Now, did they go in there when the animal was dead to feast? Or did they go in there where it was an empty living chamber just to get out of, to protect themselves? I don't know. But this trilobite was a decent size. And it's not a complete whole trial, but it's in there in the living chamber. And I thought it was kind of neat. I think that was the first one I ever found with trilobite in the living chamber. And I got the fossil out and put it in my car and told the person running that I didn't feel safe, and so I was going to leave, and I did.
So question, John, now that everybody's really excited about this, where can people go to find some of these?
Where can you go?
John's
Honestly,
Well, okay,
I am
yes,
going to
where
be. I'm
could
going to be
I go?
okay, Catherine. I'm going to be real honest with you. You cannot get into any of the quarries in Illinois or Wisconsin. I and I told Kathy can't get in quarries anymore, but I told her the same thing. I said they wouldn't let you in either. They almost didn't let the one quarry I'm thinking of. Actually, the one that I showed you the picture of with the grassy layer. They almost didn't let Dennis Collada go in, and he was in the survey. I convinced them to let him in, but they weren't going to let him in. I've been going there for 30 years. I've been going there for 40 years, and I sign a thing and they let me in. I call ahead, but they let me in. They won't let anybody else in. Now, okay. That said, how many quarries can I get into? There's 3 active quarries in northern Illinois. I can get into 2 of them. The other one won't let anybody in. In fact, I think legally they can keep out the Illinois survey people, but only 2 active quarries in southern Wisconsin. None. Now, there's one that I haven't been to in a couple of years, and I need to go there and check because some people came in and started breaking some of the rock up. So they may be opening that quarry again. It's the quarry that I got that where is it? It's the quarry that I got this guy in. Right there. It's the core I got that guy in. And by the way, I got a number of very complete Richardsonostris of both species. Anyway, so I got to check that out. But Kathy and I, in 40, 40 years ago, we had 24 quarries that would let us in, and we would go to them sporadically to see how they were doing. If there was a shot, we would stop and look. If there wasn't, we'd move on. And now in Illinois, there's three. And again, the one you can't get into it. Uh, and I do have I did get into it though when her father ran the quarry. He was a good guy. He let me in, and I took a picture after they. It's in next year's expo talk, and it's a beautiful high wall. It's got all of the members of the Platteville Formation. They went deep. They went into the Pecatonica, and I took a picture of it. I didn't put the Jacob staff there because even I am not that stupid to go to a 110-foot high wall to put something down. No, but I took several pictures of it. 110-foot high wall in that quarry. Anyway, so not much left. Now, is there road cuts? Occasionally there are. On the west side of the Rock River, southwest of Byron, there's a very large road cut. And when it was first put in, when they redid Illinois 2, they put this road cut in, and it was a real good road cut. Okay. Forston, I was getting some decent stuff, and not a lot, but decent stuff. What it looks like now, I hate to say because they get overgrown and so, but that was a place I would tell people. Some people from the, I think it was Dry Dredgers over in Cincinnati. I said, well, I said, you're not gonna get into a quarry. I said, I'll tell you that right now. I said, and we don't have any stream cuts. So go to if you come here passing through, go to this cut. And they found a few things, but, um, quarries, the active quarries were always the best because they would shoot the rock and then you could go there. The one quarry, the quarry I can't get into now, would shoot in the fall, leave it weather over the winter, and in the spring, I would go in there and start hacking and whacking it. Oh, Catherine, the stuff that I got out of that, it's disgraceful. But this rock was weird because often when you cracked it, you didn't get that part like of the ones I showed you, and you would get the entire empty chamber, and there'd be a little bit of mud in there. So it dissolved when it was in the actually before it got shot. But every once in a while, you get good stuff. Coiled, um, truncated guys, the new one, oncocerids by the bagful. So it was a good quarry.
So
Anyway,
Catherine, the
Yes.
answer to your question is John's basement. That's where you go. Right, John?
Okay, so we need a field trip to John's basement. All right, I'm gonna put my request in to Jeremy and Connor, and we'll get a field trip going.
I'm sorry.
Especially if John's not there, better timing.
If you okay, to what Marv said, you saw those oncocerids. Most of them were from the forest in bed, and that big plate was from the forest and with 12 on it. Okay, I've got two regular size flats without boxes with oncocerids with just Beloid ostracin to the brim. One for the Beloit West Quarry and a separate one full to the brim of Beloit Ostrus from the State Line Quarry. That's all that's in there. And they're not in little nice little boxes like these right here. No, 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 no. They're all piled in there together. That shows you how prevalent these were. And then there's other boxes that have Bolidosauros from other quarries. But this foresting was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And there's except for that road cut, there's no foresting left. The good that Beloit West quarry, Carl is filling it in. I used to be able to get up. That will be in next year's Expo talk too. I show where I excavated it by hand with crowbars and wedges and sledgehammers in my youth when I was only 72, not 77. It was in my
Your Ute,
youth. And
your
I
Ute.
found, oh, the stuff I found in there was amazing. Just amazing. Anyway,
I like
you'll
that,
see that
Rich,
next year.
when John was a Ute.
Yep.
Mhm.
When I was a youth, my dad took me to that. This is how long that quarry's been there. He took me to the Trestbridge Road quarry. And I remember the first fossil I found there was a gastropod, Clathrospira. I remember that. And unfortunately, the only hammers he had were ball peen hammers. And even then I knew, I was like 10 years old. Even then I knew, don't use a ball peen hammer on solid rock. It's not a good idea. So we just were there for a half hour or so. I got a few fossils and we went home. But that quarry had been there for, I think right now it's going on 100 years. That's how old that quarry is. And they opened it up. This is what was neat. They opened it up in the 90s, in the mid 90s. They opened it up. I happen to know the quarry guy that was in the office, Rafferty. So when I went there by that trash quarry and they had made 5 shots all at once, all across the Cowan. I knew it was there. So I went up there to the White House. I said, "Can I go in there?" I said, "Why don't you give Rafferty a call and tell him?" And they said, "Okay, go on in." So while they were crushing the rock, I went up to the plateau and started collecting. Oh my God. The stuff that came out of there. I've got in boxes, flats, I've got 6 flats of just nautiloids from that. I was there, I was there 2 years, I think. And it was amazing. And they let me up anytime I wanted to go in there. I had to stay away from the bottom. I went up to the top and collected on where they blasted. I went into and it was amazing. One of the best, maybe the best Cowan quarry I've had. It's that's the one that they went into, and now I'm going to tell you right now, don't go in there. The state police use that as a shooting range. So please, the Trask Bridge Road quarry is easy to find because it's on Trask Bridge Road. I mean, this is not rocket science, but please don't go in there. Um, if the state police find you there, they will be annoyed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho, any other questions? So that I can stop telling my
Thank,
I have
stories?
one. I have one more question, John.
Yep.
If you go back when you showed the Ordovician and you showed the world map and the trade winds,
Yeah.
and you said there was volcanic activity and mountain building going on,
Yeah.
what is that? Does that still exist? Those mountains? Where is that now?
The Appalachians.
Oh, it's Appalachians. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that, but I wanted to be sure.
Yeah. No, that was the subduction zone was on the east side of the Appalachians. They're the ones that built up. On the other side of the trench, you often have either island arcs or mountains, and the mountains developed. At one time in the late Ordo, early Silurian, if you went to the Appalachians, you would look at them and say, those are the Rocky Mountains. They were that high, that rugged, with glaciers on them. You could not tell the difference between the Rocky Mountains of today and the Appalachians back in the old days. And I mean, real old days. So, and it's just been, weathering this brought them down. You can now, oftentimes, the core of the mountain is exposed because it's worn weathered so much, eroded so much of the stuff down. But yeah, that's where it was. Uh, see if I can quickly get to it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, the Appalachians would form right here. There was the island arc, the tectonic orogenic belt. Right here was the subduction zone, and that's where the stuff was blowing out, and the winds would bring it out this way. I'm not sure how much the hurricanes had to do with it. Um, I think it was mainly the trade winds that brought them in. The hurricanes are going to blow it a different way, but the hurricanes are not as common as the prevailing, and all of these wind belts are prevailing, so they would have the most effect on it. But the hurricanes did have some effect, and they curved again. They're curving the other way. Up here, they curve this way towards us to the west and northwest, and then when they get in the westerly wind belt, they zip on out to the east to the Atlantic Ocean. I had my kids at in earth science and at Downers Grove. We did maps. We measured of a actual hurricane. We measured the time, how many days, and blah blah blah, and how many miles. And they saw that down there in the trade winds, they were going because they're moving counterclockwise. That's against the wind. So they're moving very slowly. But when they got in the western wind belt, they zipped on out like 200 miles a day, 400 miles a day, something like that. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, the hurricanes have something to do with it. Interesting. Here's a trivia question. Do you know why the hurricanes cannot form on the equator?
Need the spin,
Jim?
the Coriolis effect. They need the spin from the rotation of the Earth.
Yep. There's no Coriolis at the equator. Now, you might say to yourself, if you remember your high school physics, the Coriolis is a effect, not a force. It's what we call a fictitious force. However, fictitious forces are real on non-inertial frames of reference. The Earth rotates. It's non-inertial. So, does the Coriolis effect have an effect on a hurricane? Sure it does. Yeah, it makes a move. If you were in space, could you see these curved? No. The winds and the hurricanes would go straight. If you were in space and look down, the winds are going straight, but the Earth is rotating. A little bit of physics. I like chemistry better than physics.
So if hurricanes
I
can't
did.
form on the equator,
Right.
if they can volcanoes form on the
Oh,
equator?
oh yeah, totally different thing. In fact, I think, Catherine, that some hurricanes, like over in Australia, I think some, if they curve around, can actually cross the equator. Uh, I'm not totally certain, but I think that's a possibility. All right. So what you have here is 10 to 15 degrees away from the equator is where hurricanes form both in the southern and northern hemisphere. You have to have that Coriolis effect in operation. The equator has no Coriolis. Just a little bit of physics for you. I used to
Uh,
teach that too.
Question.
Like
John,
chemistry. Yes.
So I know
I'm
the
gonna,
odds are low, but do you ever find any evidence of predation on any of your wonderful Dixon nautiloids, since you have such exceptional preservation?
Yeah,
I
we were
assume that
talking about that.
the best place to attack them would be from behind on the ventral
Yes,
side of the body
yes.
chain. Do you ever have any hints of?
I don't have they don't go back far enough. And the ones that do, I've got some actinoceros that are, you would be amazed how long those things were. And that's only about half of it. Um, but no, we were talking about drilling, and I think I've got maybe one or two, maybe from Dixon, that have a small drill hole, like a gastropod. I can't
Right.
remember for certain, but I don't have. I'm trying to think now if I have any nautiloids that actually have a bite taken out of them, and I don't think I do. It would have to be a larger, if Actinoceras came down and saw a nice juicy Richardsonostris, it would take that thing in its jaws and just crush it. I mean, the shell would be probably gone, so that would, wouldn't fossilize. So I can't remember any that shows any real predation. Um, Usually the real animals that predated the Actinoceras, Proteoceras, were in the water column. They were swimming, and everything else was on the substrate. And except for Goniaceras, I don't think any of the Oncocerids could prey on each other. They would prey on trilobites or gastropods, but not each other. Goniaceras, however, was down in the substrate. Bob refers to it as a flounder. It buries itself in there, and then it waits for critters to come by. And it wouldn't matter if it was a gastropod or a Beloidoceras. It would take its arms, grab that thing, crunch it up, and it'd be gone. I think that's part of the problem, maybe, Jim, that those little guys would get all
When they got preyed on,
totally,
the whole thing
yeah,
got
just
not
broken up.
just
I'd have to get one of the larger ones, and I haven't noticed that. But I've got to go through everything again for the paper anyway, so I might check all this stuff out. It's going to take me a month to go through all this stuff. Oh
gonna say I
God.
always keep
I'm
an eye out
gonna
for that
stop
and
the recording, but keep going, keep talking. I'm gonna stop the recording just to let everybody know. Keep talking though.
Okay,
I was gonna
Catherine,
say I
go ahead, Jim.
always look out for predation on the Devonian ones from like Independence or whatever, and I've never found any that were obvious.
Yeah, yeah.